Hi friends, welcome to the industry with me, Jerry Jarme, where we discuss creativity, business and life in between. For this episode, we're going to dive straight in and discuss the difficulties we're all facing with the economic impact of COVID-19. As you can imagine, there is a lot of info to digest, and understanding the right financial support for freelancers, business owners, limited companies and sole directors is a bit of a minefield. What support is on offer? When can you access it? And what are the repercussions for the future? I'll be discussing this with Ed Kirkby, who is the founder and CEO of Accounts Lab, a company that champions the business owners and one of the few professionals who has a master's degree in taxation. Edward also has a few business interests in retail and leisure, giving him the unique ability to offer advice to startups, entrepreneurs and small business owners like you and I from a very personal and professional angle. Edward's here to answer those difficult questions for freelancers and small business owners. He's going to break down and translate that government lingo here today. He's going to tell you who qualifies for the government grants, loans and PAYE and what you need to do to claim it. All these nitty-gritty details will be broken down in this one episode, so you don't have to spend all your quarantine time trying to figure out how you will survive now and in the future. So let's get straight to the facts and find out what the COVID-19 government support means for you. Hi Ed, thank you for joining me here today on The Industry. It is a pleasure to have you here. So I'll just give everyone a quick intro. This is Ed Kirkby. He's the founder and CEO of Accounts Lab, and he's here to help us review what it is that we can do for freelancers and small business owners, solo directors, because there's a lot of questions coming in about being a solo director as a small limited company. He's here to answer those difficult questions and help us gain more clarity on what it is that we can do to support ourselves now and in the future. So Ed, let's start with our job retention scheme. So please talk me through being furloughed.
Yeah, so being furloughed essentially is if you are going to be made redundant by your employer, the government have said to employers, don't make that individual redundant. Instead, you can furlough them and the government will pay 80% of their wage, up to £2,500, to the individual for the time that he's furloughed. And that scheme's backdated to the 1st of March and it runs to May, and it's going to be reviewed again then. So really, essentially what it is that individual doesn't work anymore, well, remains employed, but what's called furloughed, and they continue to gain holiday, employment rights, everything like that, but they get paid 80% of their wage by the government, but they can be topped up by the employer as well. So, okay. Yeah, so the big point on that is there are two things. You can either be paid 80% of your wage up to £2,500, or your employer can continue to pay you your full wage and top you up that extra. The main thing with furloughing though is if you are furloughed, you cannot do any work for the employer.
Okay, all right. So that is, you can no longer, if you are a, say, limited company and you're the director and you're furloughing yourself, you can no longer do any work.
Other than your statutory duties. So, yeah, so it's two different, well, not two different things. So if you're a normal employee, so an employee where you're not the director of your own company, so just a normal run-of-the-mill employee for a business, then you don't do any work. And if your employer asks you to do any work, then they're breaching the rules, really. So you're not supposed to do any, that's the rules of it. If you're a director, it's obviously very different because you're running your company, you have to do certain things. So there's a bit of grey area when the job retention scheme was first announced, of whether it's even possible for a director to furlough themselves. And it is, but you're not supposed to do any work at all, but you can do your statutory duties. So maybe some filing things at Companies House, tidying up the books, bits and bobs like that. But anything to actually gain revenue generating, you're not allowed to do if you're furloughed. No.
So that means that if you're the sole director of your company and you have no secretary or anybody else who is a director, you can still furlough yourself. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely correct. So a director can furlough themselves. So we're probably jumping onto the questions about furloughing directors anyway, but it's all very related. Um, yes, you can furlough yourself, but more often, well, if your accountant was advising you, you should be on a smaller salary and a larger dividends, which is the usual remuneration strategy for a director of their own company. So you can furlough yourself, but you'll only get 80% of your salary. So more often than not, you're being paid anywhere between £700, £800, £900 a month, usually about £719 a month. So you get 80% of that.
Which is around about
So
the
unfortunately,
500.
the remuneration that you get paid, yeah, something like that. So unfortunately, dividends aren't taken into account. So your normal remuneration is from small salary and dividends, but when you furlough yourself, you only get 80% of your wage. So your remuneration by dividend, unfortunately, isn't taken into account at all.
And is that going to be for the, sorry, Ed, is that going to be for the foreseeable future that dividends isn't going to be taken into account? Is that something that you know of?
I'm pretty sure that's how it is at the moment. I'm pretty sure it won't. It won't be. That structure is put in place purely for tax efficiency. So I can't see how directors of limited companies will be rewarded for avoiding tax and national insurance by being, by their dividends and salary as a total remuneration. So I think it would just be looked at of what they pay themselves, their salary. But like I say, people can't furlough themselves and then continue to work and do projects on and off. If a big project comes in, for instance, next month, then you won't be able to be furloughed. You'll have to, if it's the correct term, unfurlough yourself and not be able to claim it back from the.
So let's just talk about. So sorry, Ed. Let's just talk about that unfurloughing yourself. So, I mean, for many solo entrepreneurs, small limited companies, they are going to furlough themselves probably now until we're looking maybe July, August, hoping to get work back in September. So we know that we won't be getting paid until June. So will we be getting backdated payments from March, or how are they going to continue it?
So the scheme's only been announced for March, April, May, and I think it'll be looked at again in May. So no one knows how much longer we're going to be locked down for or anything like that. But how the scheme's actually going to work is you continue to pay yourself from your company, declare your salary, everything like that, and the government repays you that amount. That mechanism and process isn't even in place yet. So the portals by the government haven't been released. So I think at the end of April, beginning of May, you'll have to go in there, put your name, any other employees that have been furloughed, how much you've been paid, and then you'll get a repayment back from the government as and when. But that system's only up to May. So going forwards, who knows what's going to be happening? I expect they'll kick it on for a month or two after that, but we don't know yet.
Yeah, because it's very difficult, because even though we may come out of quarantine in June, let's say, a lot of photographers especially, or small limited companies, probably won't start picking up work until September. So it's like, how do you keep your business afloat until that time?
Exactly, it's very difficult. And although the furlough scheme's extremely generous by the government, one of the difficult things is it's not the government paying your employees or yourself direct. You have to pay them first and then reclaim it. So I've already been speaking to lots of clients that say, we only have X amount in the bank now. We can't pay wages at the end of April. Although we get it back from the government, 80%, we can't physically pay them now, ready to reclaim it. We just haven't got the cash flow. So I think at the end of April, there's going to be redundancies rather than furlough, because people can't afford to pay the wages in the first instance. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult for directors, sole directors of limited companies, because you just don't know when that work's coming in. I was speaking to someone earlier today who works out in the UAE in TV and film, and they're saying they don't know when the next projects are coming in at all. Probably September, October time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, for many, especially for many creatives, it's a knock-on effect. It's not like, oh, boom, where all the shops are open again. Ours takes time to build back up, and then there's a lead time. Then there's another month to even 2 months to get paid. So if we go on from the job retention scheme and we're talking about income survival for the next till September, October, then let's talk about maybe a business interruption loan scheme, how that might be more feasible for small businesses.
Yeah, so it's the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, which people are calling CBILS,
Yeah.
for the acronym for it. People they range anything up to 5 million that you can get, but they are for partnerships, limited companies. I think sole traders can as well, but it's something worth looking at small. So as long as that limited company is profitable, has been profitable. When they were first announced, people weren't just that they weren't that beneficial because no one, if people are in hardship, you don't want to go get yourself in, a lot of loans and things like that because you can't afford to pay them back in the future potentially. But what they did announce, because the banks weren't essentially playing ball on these, is that any loans up to £250,000 aren't going to be requiring a personal guarantee. So
Okay.
prior to coronavirus, let's say myself as my business or your business, you go to the bank and say, this is what I want to do for growth or expansion or, cash flow, anything like that. This is what loan I need. Excuse me. And the bank would normally say, yep, that's absolutely fine. But the notion of a limited company being a limited liability kind of doesn't exist with loans, because they'd say, yeah, that's fine, here's the loan, but you have to sign a personal guarantee. So if your company fails, Jerry ends up paying that loan still. It doesn't fail with the company.
Mm-hmm.
So, your house would be security or something like that. So you'd always end up paying that loan. With these coronavirus loans, there's no personal guarantee up to 250,000. So essentially, if you can get one in your business, there's no personal liability on you as an individual to end up paying that back, which is extremely good. I wouldn't advise having to get a loan if you don't need one. But for instance, I've got other businesses on the high street, and I'm looking to get them for that. I wouldn't normally, because if those high street shops won't bust, because it's quite volatile, the high street, I don't want the banks coming, to get my home off me and using whatever I own personally for that. But for now, to get, let's say, 100, 200,000 within that company, if in 6 months that business fails, then that loan lies with that business and the liability. It doesn't come back to me personally. So it's very good.
So it's very good. So that means as a limited company, if you own, say, a studio, if you're a creative and you've got studios or offices, and your company goes under because of this virus, then you are not liable to pay that loan back, where usually you would be liable. So you've just got to be a bit more.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got to be.
Yeah. I mean, as long as they go after assets within your company. So if you owned a studio or a property or something that was owned by the company, then obviously that would be consideration for the loan. But any personal assets, like your house where you live, you don't want your business to fail and the bank to come after your house.
Precisely.
They couldn't touch that because you don't have to personally guarantee anything. They're not allowed up to 250,000. So it's really good, because that you'd never be able to get a loan under those terms prior to
so
this.
It could really be a little bit of a lifeline for your business going forward. To mainly, I think it's for cash flow. Like we said, it's for freelancers and, well, for business owners to have that cash flow to pay staff, to keep working, to get to jobs, to keep that equipment coming in, and just to keep turning the business over until we can get back on our feet again.
Absolutely, yeah. And I sat through a Zoom conference on Friday with some lenders and things talking about the loan scheme. And it was, you don't just go to the bank and say, this is what it is. You have to put your last set of accounts, management reports up to, let's say, February. I had a viable business, but now it's not going to be. And then you have to show cash flow forecasts of severely reduced revenue or zero revenue make sure you've used all the other schemes, furloughing, VAT deferment, and say that you did have a viable business, but because of the coronavirus, you no longer have one for the interim. That's why you need the loan, and if you can fulfil all that criteria, then you should be able to get one.
Okay, all right, brilliant. So, what makes that different to the small business grant funding of 10,000?
So, a grant, by its very nature, doesn't have to be repaid. It's a gift of money by the government. But the £10,000 from the government is linked to small business rates relief. So it is, which there's been some criticism of it because a lot of people these days don't have offices or studios. Everyone works from home, really. So a lot of people don't have a place of work or an office. So, but if you do, and you get small business rates relief, so that's, and I think the limits, if it's got a rateable value of £12,000 and under, so you'd normally get a letter every year to say this is your small business rates of X amount, but you get small business rates relief of 100%, so you don't pay business rates. If you are entitled to that, so if you get small business rates every single year, you're entitled to a £10,000 grant from the government. Simple as that. I've entitled to one myself for my office, where accounts lab are based. It's a simple online form. Just put in your bank details, your business address, the name of your company. You'll need your small business rates kind of reference or number, and if you haven't got reference of that or access to post these days to get it out, give the council a call, send them an email. I've sent 3 emails because I've got 3 different properties around in like York, Manchester, Leeds, and they've all got back to me and given me details of it. And then it's simply completed online, and you should get the £10,000 paid direct to your bank account.
And is this something that, with getting the small business relief, is this something that you can start up right now, or is it something that you had to already have in the past?
Oh, you should have when you move into any office or property, so to speak, so studio, office, or something like that, it should always have a rateable value. So you'd move into there, you'd be paying your rent to the landlord essentially, and it will have a rateable value for business rates, and you'd get a letter from the council to say this is what your business rates are, but then you apply small business rates because it's under the £12,000 rateable value and you don't pay anything. I have had a conversation with a client in the last few days that they were under the impression that their landlord had dealt with all of that, but they hadn't. So they didn't even have a rateable value. So they're in the circumstances of having to go to the business rates, go to the council now and say, can you please value me from when I moved in a couple of years ago to give me a rateable value so I can claim the small business rates relief and then try and get the 10 grand. So there's lots of different circumstances. One thing to look at as well is if you have a space in co-working.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, some of those operate quite differently. So I've spoken to 2 recently where one co-working space, they don't have small business rates relief because the rateable value kind of area, forgive me, I don't know the actual terms, I'm not a surveyor, but that's done on the whole floor. So the co-working space, they just pay that, for instance, pay the rates, and it's probably absorbed into everyone. So they claim it. Where another co-working space that I was speaking with, it's actually our client, each separate office has its own rateable value. So they've gone to the local council and each separate office has got a rateable value, all comes under small business rates relief, and then they're each entitled to the £10,000 grant. So that's something to look into as well. So depending on what co-working space you are and how it kind of operates and works with the business rates, you could be entitled to it or not.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
So that's the 10,000 small business rates relief, but also sorry, go on, Jerry.
No, I was thinking there's quite a lot of creatives that work at WeWork, especially in London. So it's like if you've already got an office within there, how do you go about getting the small business relief? But that's something they would have to discuss with the co-working space.
Yeah, speak to WeWork first and see how it operates, and see, if if you have like a desk, like a desk in a co-working, but you won't, but you'll need a separate office within there to be able to get it. yeah, an office, but you don't. They'll need to check if that office has got its own kind of rateable value within it. But there is another grant available as well, which is for £25,000. And that is if your rateable value is between the 15 and 51, and you're in the sector.
In the what, sorry?
So if you're in like hospitality, retail, leisure sectors, so we're talking bars, restaurants, things like that, then if your rateable value is between 15 and up to 51, then you can get £25,000 grant. But that's not for every business. So that's quite good. But there are obviously larger businesses where, well, I say larger businesses, it's not based on the actual size of the business, it's based on your premises. So there are ones in larger premises. Again, I've got a client that's in the food and drink, has just got kind of like a street food stand, but their rateable values just slightly over the 51, so they're not entitled to anything at all. They're not entitled to 25. So it's difficult. It is difficult. Now those cut-off points where you either get something or nothing. It's not adjusted between how much you're over. So it's a kind of all or nothing thing. And then next year in that industry, yeah, it's really difficult. So like I've got 3 shops on the high street. 2 of them qualify for the 25. Shops on the high street have a rate between the 15 and 51, and they are entitled to the 25,000, something like that, because obviously rent's still payable in this period, even though legally you have to be closed down. Which is, you can have conversations with your landlords, but at the end of the day, landlords' business is to get rent, so it's hard on them as well. But I have one shop which the rateable value is way over 51, doesn't get any help at all, so it doesn't get any grants. It's just coming up to a year old, so can't get any loans or anything like that, so it's has to fend for itself, unfortunately.
God, it's such stressful times, isn't it? It's not only about thinking about how you're spending the savings that you have now to survive, but it's also thinking about how do you survive going forward, because there's people aren't going to be spending, but everything will be discounted to people to try and get money in, but until we get back to normal, it's difficult for everyone. Now, another question I have.
So difficult.
It is.
I was just going to say on that point, Jerry, it's very easy to say now, and it's a bit of foresight, but going forward, it's always good to remember things do happen. Always try and have a bit of cash reserves in the bank, have a healthy-ish balance sheet. Yes, you've got to grow like that, but people, every bit of money that comes into their company, they could have £1,000 or £150,000. Sometimes they pay it all out, so it's sometimes nice to put a bit of a war chest in there, just because in case you don't know what's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah, to have it's cash flow. It's one thing that most of us, freelancers and entrepreneurs and
absolutely
small business owners have learned is definitely have cash saved in the bank.
That's it. But it's easy to say because, we haven't got the luxury of, freelancers don't have the luxury of having all the time, just fine, go for the next job. So it's easy for me to say, try and save some cash in there, but you need the cash just to pay the bills.
That's it, isn't it? It's catch-22. A quick question that I got asked was about statutory sick pay. So it says, there's a package for small and medium-sized businesses. Is that something that's available for directors of limited companies that paid themselves PAYE?
Yeah, if you're statutory sick pay, you can claim that and you pay yourself it, and then it'd be reclaimed from month. So you've got a question there. I'd need to look into whether they've changed the rules. So you used to have to be off for 3 days before you could be paid statutory sick pay. But I'd need to check if directors can pay themselves statutory sick pay. But what you do again, you have to pay yourself it and then reclaim it from the government. So thinking about it, you'd be better off just paying yourself your wage and furloughing yourself if you're sick.
Yeah, then rather than having to pay yourself again. And also, what about the universal grant? Is that open to everybody? Limited companies, freelancers?
Credits.
Yeah, that's it. Universal credits.
Yeah, so I mean, universal credit's something that I've been having to learn about over the last couple of weeks because, ironically, it's something we never really deal with benefits. We deal with people who have their own businesses and who are, working. So universal credit is normally for people, whereas for people who are out of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's available for everyone, I believe, and you have to go through a telephone interview, and they talk you through the criteria. There are certain things that make you not eligible for it. So if you have, for instance, £16,000 worth of savings, you can't get universal credit. I think they look at your partner's income as well.
Oh, okay.
For universal credit. But it's about £90 a week, I believe. It's incredibly difficult to get through on the phones at the moment as well. It's taking anywhere between 2 and 5 hours to get through to the phones on universal credit. And then they ring you back for an appointment. They have changed it where you can just do it over the phone, because before you'd have to go to the job centre, but now with everyone being locked down, you can't. But that's definitely an option as well to look into. But when you'll call them, have a conversation with them, they'll talk you through and whether you're entitled to it.
I definitely think if you're a freelancer and you've just started, or if you don't have savings, or if you're at home on your own, an extra £100, I think it's £100 a week coming in, that's £400 a month is
100%, yeah, especially if you've just started and you're just self-employed, because if you've just started, you're in the absolute worst situation, even worse than directors, their own limited companies who can furlough themselves for a small amount. If you're just recently self-employed, you're not entitled to any of the self-employed help, which we haven't discussed yet.
Mm-hmm.
So universal is your only option.
Yeah, so I'm moving on to that, actually, the self-employed income support scheme. Doing a bit of research myself, it sounds like it's a really good scheme for freelancers. It's quite, you can easily get your head around it, and I think you get 80% of what your tax was. Is that correct?
It's similar to the job retention scheme, really, but I mean, people are getting kind of confused in that if they're directors of their own companies, some people think they're self-employed. So they'll be like, oh, I'm self-employed. You're not really, because you're an employee of your own company and you pay yourself dividends. So that would be the job retention scheme. You'd furlough yourself. Self-employed is, when you're a self-employed individual and you just prepare your tax return and do it on the self-employed pages there.
That's called a sole trader.
Sole trader, self-employed, yeah, same thing. Sole trader, yeah. So it's very good on the face of it, what they've announced. It's 80%, again, up to 2,500. They go back over the last 3 years, so they're saying, I'm looking at your 3 years returns. If you earn over 50,000, then you're not going to be entitled to it. You don't qualify. So there's certain people like dentists and things like that who are self-employed, sole traders who are dentists, they earn too much. They won't to 20. And then what the government say, it's 80% up to 2,500. You don't have to do anything at the moment. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing actionable for the individual to do. So as soon as it was announced on that Thursday night, I think by 7:30, 8 o'clock, I had 57 emails from clients asking for things. It's okay. We said I had a blog written as the Chancellor was. But everyone's saying, right, 3 years tax returns, but there isn't anything to do yet. But HMRC will write to you on that, and they'll write to you if at May time. But they're saying you're not going to be paid it till about June.
Yeah, until June.
So again, it's good, but it's the 7th of April now. We're nowhere near June. So between now and then, universal credit. But you can continue to work now and still claim your self-employed.
Yes, and that's it. But there is no work, is there? And that's the problem that we're all facing at the moment, and we can't go out. So when they do pay in June, is that backdated from having no payment since March? So will they be paying you June, July and August?
No. They'll be paying for the March, April, May. So everything that's been announced at the moment, we're only looking at 3 months, really. March, April, May. So no one knows what's going to happen after that. So these schemes might be extended after that, but for now it's just March, April, May time.
So they'll pay you in June for March, April, May. So will they pay you in one bulk, or will they be paying you monthly?
No one knows. Well, it'll be in bulk, but no
It'll
one
be
knows when that. I mean, they should be paying it sooner. I don't see why. Well, other than their workload, but June's a long time to wait. So if they can do it sooner, hopefully they will. But there are a lot of anomalies with that we don't really know about. So I'm getting a lot of clients come to me saying, will they take, because obviously we're in the 2021 tax year now. It's the second day of that, so it started yesterday. People are wanting to submit their 1920 tax returns yesterday and today, saying, if I submit it and I have higher earnings, will they take that into account? My answer is I don't know. They possibly could, up for the previous 3 years. So if you had very low amounts, if you had employment that was higher 1 year, because we have quite a few clients who are actors as well sometimes, and they have self-employed acting income, but also they do jobs on the side. If your employed income is higher than your self-employed income, then that year doesn't qualify. So, for instance, if someone last year got a part-time job in a restaurant and didn't have too many jobs as an actor, then that year wouldn't qualify, so they might not qualify this year. There's a lot of grey areas still that we're waiting to see, and we're waiting to see how HMRC will assess it and analyse it. So I know we discussed prior to this, but again, I've pretty much had every conversation possible over the last 2 weeks about this, but there are people that, as you normally would, if your self-employed business starts generating more revenue and things, you'd look to turn to a limited company. So you set up that limited company in the 1920 tax year. Essentially, HMRC don't know that you're no longer self-employed. So will they assess that you're still self-employed because you haven't submitted a 1920 tax return yet? You've still got 3 years of self-employment. If you then submit a tax return later next year and you haven't got self-employment on there, do you have to repay any income that they've assessed that you're owed back, because you don't have self-employed income anymore? There's a lot of,
there's a lot of grey areas, isn't there?
There really are, because as people go in and out of self-employment, set up limited companies, and with where we are at the moment with this all happening, it's happening over 2 tax years. So last year's tax return can be submitted. So HMRC by May, June time will have some people's information. They won't have a lot of people's information because it doesn't have to be submitted till the 31st of January. So there is going to be, a lot of things, that who knows what will happen, whether people are entitled to it or not.
And talking about actually submitting your tax return, the time is running out. So April the 23rd, they want you to get your self-assessment tax in, and that's for last year. Is that correct?
April the 23rd?
Yeah. I've got times running out. April 23rd, self-assessment tax.
Where'd you get that from, Jerry?
This from the government. This is if you're delayed. So this is if you haven't done it already, and then this.
So this
happened,
is if you haven't done your 18, 19.
Yeah, they were giving you a further few, like a couple of weeks to get it done, so this could help you, and that time runs out on April the 23rd.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I was.
I've been doing my research, Ed. I've been doing my research.
Well, I know, yeah. I mean, thankfully, I don't have any clients that haven't done their 18-19 yet. But yeah, if you haven't done your 18-19, which the deadline for that was the 31st of January, what the government have said is you're not going to be penalised for doing that, but you've got 4 weeks to get it in, basically. So that runs out. Get that in, and then your 18-19 will qualify when you do that. But also, in that time, you could do your 1920 as well, because that tax year is gone.
Yeah. Just do whatever helps, really. Whatever helps you and your business for now and going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been speaking to clients, and I mean, from 2 different perspectives, really. Some people can work from home and have a lot of work on at the moment. Other people find it hard to do anything from working from home. But some have come to me and said, I'm using the time to actually do my tax return rather than leave it till January. Do it now, get it in nice and early. Doing your tax return early doesn't mean that you have to pay the tax earlier. And on that point, one of the things that was announced is 31st of July payment on account, so you'd have if you are in the payment on account system in your personal tax return. So broadly, if your tax liability is over £1,000, you have to make payments on account towards the following year.
Yeah.
That July payment that should be due is no longer due. You don't have to pay it. You just pay the balance in January now. So that's helped.
That's brilliant. And that's for limited companies, is that correct?
No, that's for individuals.
That's for individuals, okay.
Yes, individuals who have payments on account. So normally you pay your balance in tax in January, then your first payment in January as well, and your second payment on account in July. That July payment on account no longer has to be made. You don't have to apply for it either to HMRC to not pay it or anything like that. That's automatically given. So yeah, if you have a payment to be made in July, don't pay it.
Okay.
I mean, you can. Brilliant. It's up to you, but obviously, if you don't pay it, don't spend it.
Yeah. That's the problem, isn't it? Same with deferring your VAT at the moment. You still need to pay that in June. So if you do defer it, you must be aware that you still need to pay it. So just going back to limited companies with being furloughed, they can't do anything at this moment in time. So they are waiting to be contacted. But if you're self-employed, you have to sort it out yourself with the government. Is that correct?
No, the other way around. So if you're self-employed, the government will come to you and you'll get a letter or some correspondence May, June. If you're an employer and you're furloughing yourself, you make the decision to either pay yourself or your staff either the normal amount or 80% of that. Continue to do that. And then once HMRC release the kind of scheme, this portal, which they're going to have on their website, where you can then tell the government who has been furloughed and they'll pay you back. So really for both schemes, there's nothing to do yet, but the actionable thing to do sooner will be for when staff are furloughed. So towards the end of April, beginning of May, once that portal, website, whatever it is released, everyone will be rushing to tell the government who has been put on furloughed leave to get the repayment back from the government.
So, and just a quick one about being furloughed and the payment back from the government. Does that mean, so for example, I am a limited company, but I'm not paying myself anything at the moment or a wage, I've just stopped everything in my account. So does that mean because I'm not paying myself this 80%?
You'd still be putting the salary through.
So I've still...
Yeah, I mean, even though you don't have to physically take the money out, you can still put process the salary. So you can still process the £719 a month, put that through your tax software, or you get your accountant to process your payroll. You don't physically have to take that money out of the company. It's your luxury to take money out of your company as and when through your director's loan account. Yeah, so you process the payroll, but you don't have to take the money out. But essentially, you have processed the payroll, and then you'll get the money back from the government.
Okay, so keep processing the payroll, but if you haven't processed the payroll, then would you still get any money from the government or not?
And that's quite. I've picked up on some. I've spoken to some, thankfully not clients of ours, who haven't been processing any payroll for their limited company. You had to have an active PAYE reference in February, and you had to be on the payroll as of 28th of February to be furloughed. So unfortunately, there's no. Can't be any rushing to set up a pay-as-you-earn scheme in March, putting yourself on there and furloughing yourself. It's kind of, if you weren't on there when they announced the scheme, there's nothing you can do. So that is one of the bad things of the scheme, in that anyone who had new employees as of the 1st of March, they can't be furloughed.
Right, okay. So then they'd have to have a look at other schemes and grants to help them through this time.
Yeah, I mean, if I actually took on a new member of staff on the 1st of March, but thankfully we're not furloughing anyone, but I spoke to a client who did, so they either have to pay their wage, or if they don't want to pay their wage, they have to be made redundant.
Right, okay. Oh God, hard times. Okay, well, thank you, Ed, for answering those questions. And if anybody else wants to find any other information, they can go to accountslab.com, services/coronavirus loan schemes applications. Is that correct?
business loan. But what they can have a look at if they go on the blogs section on our website. So go on the accountslab.com, click on the blogs. Down the right hand side, there's different categories. Click on the coronavirus section there, and there's details of every single one of these schemes on there, and it's quite useful information. So we've kind of analysed it and tried to put it into layman's terms, and there's also links in there. So for universal credit, there's links to claim on the government and everything like that. So yeah, go on the coronavirus section of our blog. There's lots of useful information.
Perfect. And I'll put that link below as well, so people can click straight on the link and it will connect straight to the to Accounts Labs. Thank you again for your time. It's been wonderful, really informative. It's going to help a lot of people and hopefully de-stress and lessen the anxiety that many of us feel in this moment in time.
Yeah, me as well.
Well, guys, I hope that information was helpful. Please do leave me a comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And also don't forget to head over to accountslab.com. The link is below, where you can find more information on COVID-19 and how to help your business at this time. But thank you so much for watching. It means the absolute world to me, and it would mean even more if you subscribed for my next show. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe, stay motivated, and stay positive. Until next time.